environment. And colleagues from Cambridge as well, virtually, so and elsewhere as well. So it's great to have a kind of collection of people, both in person and online. So we're really lucky to have Professor Lucía Stubrin here, who's a professor of semiotics at the Universidad Nacional de Entre Ríos in Argentina, and also professor and research fellow at the University of Barcelona. And author of the book, actually, Bioart, poetics de lo viviente, which I guess translates as Bioart, Poetics of the Living, from 2020. And her broad research area is the kind of art, science, technology intersection. And really, Lucía is a global expert on bioart, which is a sort of, I think, well-established field now that sort of really works at the avant-garde, really, of this intersection between art, science, and technology. So it's really exciting to hear about that today. And the other notice is just that sadly Debbie Martin had a bug, so wasn't able to join us in the end. But we're just so grateful to have Lucía with us, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Emily. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Well, I'm really happy to be here. Well, I think we just start.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Well, before I begin, I would like to thank, first of all, to Dr. Emily Baker for kindly extending this invitation to me. Then to Professor Deborah Martin for taking an interest in the topic of this talk, although she couldn't be here to join the conversation. I will also like to thank Dr. Joanna Page from Cambridge University for introducing us and facilitating this meeting. Finally, I have to thank my home university, as Emily said, Universidad Nacional de Entre Ríos in Argentina, for allowing me to carry out this research stay at Universidad de Barcelona that has extended a little further north, making me present here today at the University College of London. Well, the title of this presentation, as you can see, is Situated Bioart, the Argentine Contemporary Scene and the Anthropocene. I will read, because it's more to respect the time and the order of the ideas, but you can interrupt me if you want, although the present here, the people that is present or the people online. Well, bioartists generate a critical debate about biotechnology and life processes in general, adopting a conceptual perspective that can be materialized in multiple forms. Today, video installations, robotic installations, 3D printing, data visualizations, sound interventions, interactive immersive sensory environments, virtual reality coexist with botanical designs. You can pass the other one. Handicraft techniques, do-it-yourself laboratories, just to mention a few artistic practices that continue to push the boundaries of art, technology, and life science representations. Next one. When I first started studying and researching bioart in 2010, Argentina didn't have a wide range of artists. At that time, I had to work with international examples of bioart laboratories, such as Symbiotica in Australia, Biophilia in Finland, Incubator and Flux Media in Canada, and special programs all over the world, like Swiss Artists in Labs program, Art Santa Monica in Barcelona, Spain, Colectivo Tres in Mexico, among others. Next one. Even though Argentina had the only Latin American bioart laboratory called BioLab or BioLab, founded in Buenos Aires in 2008, very few artists made residencies there. Most of its artistic production was sustained by students and teachers from Maimonides University, where BioLab was set up. The regional scene was reduced, and the presence of bioart expressions in galleries, festivals, and museums was kept to a minimum. Next. International references, such as Eduardo Kac, Marta de Meneses, Olva Nus, Oron Katz, Ionat Sur, Stellark, Beatriz da Costa, Natalie Jeremishenko, etc., had imposed a biotech laboratory aesthetic that was difficult to follow over these latitudes, partly due to the lack of resources and to the difficult access to lab techniques and materials. With the passing of time and over the last decades, I have continued studying bioart expressions in my country and in our neighborhood, Latin America, and I have realized that we have a situated appropriation of this particular kind of art and technology expression. I propose to rethink bioart practices from its first manifesto in 1998, called Transgenic Art by Eduardo Kac, that was published by MIT's Leonardo Review, to the present time, taking into account the difference between mainstream lab aesthetics and local appropriations, but also recovering particular imaginaries involving art, life sciences, and technology. I put some animations, but it didn't work. Don't worry. Since 2019, I have established a group of research in the university, and we have recognized trends in Argentinian bioart practices. The name of the group is that one, GBAT, or GBAT. For example, within the ensemble of groups and artists dedicated to the practice of situated bioart, we can identify three main lines. One, that we call interspecies communication, where hard, soft, and wet technologies are combined. Number two, or B, development of biomaterials from microorganisms such as fungi, bacteria, yerba mate, etc. And C, randomness in living processes, where artistic works await organic transformation for later registration. As I said, this classification originated from the analysis of the corpus of artists, institutions, awards, exhibitions, and festivals surveyed from 2000 to date within the framework of previous investigations. This is like we are working with these three categories, but we are thinking on add another one, because this is a very dynamic process of producing bioart. But I will start with these ones, then we can talk about them at the end. For each category, I will present 2 or 3 representative works so that you can recognize the conceptual background that supports the classification, bearing in mind that it extends to more artists and diverse examples of bioartistic practices. Okay, let's start with interspecies communication. In this case, I will present 2 projects. This one, this picture, I don't know what you see, what you can understand from the image. This project called Arquitectura Textil, or Textile Architecture. Artist Karina Salinas builds a fabric with an assembly of small textile fibers made by bichos canasto, a type of moth literally translated as basket bags. The artwork generates a symbiosis between various species, humans, insects, and vegetables. Since 2012, Salinas has been raising bichos canastos, or basket bags, a species that has disappeared from the local landscape in recent decades due to the advance of fumigation on the outskirts of the city. Next slide, please. She provides a suitable environment for them to live in her garden in a rectangular device covered with mosquito netting with a door and small tree inside. The bags, known as baskets because of the appearance and shape of their shells, are characterized by a process similar to that of butterflies. During their development, they undergo a notorious body change called metamorphosis, passing through the stages of egg, larva, pupa, and adult. That is how they build their cocoon in a protected habitat, The artists, next one, please. The artists wait a year for the end of the life cycle of the species and uses the empty cocoon to build a cape that is enlarged each year in a collaborative interspecies action. There you can see the front and back of the cape. I used this word to translate manto. Manto in Spanish has a religious connotation. I don't know if it has in English, but it's more like this is the right name to call this textile. Next one, please. In the following work, we will look at interspecies communication associated with the plant world rather than the animal universe. Rizosfera FM is the name of the work created by Colectivo Electrobiota, composed of Guadalupe Chavez and Gabriela Munguia, Mexican artists living in Argentina since a long time. The Rizosfera FM project, if we can translate it like that, is an investigation born from the curiosity to approach and generate new networks and channels of interspecies communication. Being sensitive to what the rhizosphere hides, say the artist, I quote, opens a door to what it means to be interconnected and interdependent with other species. Next one. The group argues that, I quote, understanding the interspecies relationship builds knowledge, destabilizes the centrality of language, consciousness, and learning. Thus, this project imagines this living micro-territory, porous, interwoven, interconnected, amorphous, and colonized by roots and infinite communities of species and microbial types as a territory and tool for co-creation and expression of the living. These latent organic forms become constant vibrations under the earth, waiting to be heard. In this project, what the collective does is to listen the rhizosphere, what is underground, nearby the museum with the exposition. It's been happening. So we can hear inside the museum or the gallery the sounds that the plants hanging and the plants that are living outside are talking about. And they use the FM frequencies to catch that sounds and that let us listen what we can't by other ways, by natural ways. Next one, please. Now, I will show you 3 examples of development of biomaterials because they are very different between each other. Within this classification, we find processes of creation of materials from organic agents of diverse origin and a great awareness of the ecological effect produced by waste. That is why the artists always highlight the importance of the circular economy in their experiences. That is the responsibility in the forms of productions, use, and compostable discard of each biomaterial they create. Next one, please. In the previous slide, we saw an installation by Ana Paula Hall called Liminal Process, where the artist exhibits a large number of samples of biotextiles, bioplastics, biocomposites, bioceramics, and mycelium fungus biomaterial plates. In the description of the work, Hall explains that, I quote, liminal process is an exchange of information and searches in the realm of social networks, forms community, and registers in processes and information with open source access. On the other hand, Veronica Bergottini creates a biomaterial called Tilex or Tilex, Tela de Ilex paraguariensis, in allusion to yerba mate, which is one of the nutrients that allows the growth of yarn spinning bacteria. Yerba mate is made of edible leaves used in the traditional mate beverage in Argentina. Tilex, it's not only biodegradable and compostable, but also represents a circular design challenge in which it seeks to add value to the cellulose from the productive waste of kombucha to transform it into sculptural objects and design items. Next one. At first sight, its texture is similar to cardboard or vegetable leather without imagining its microbial origin. The yerba mate industry is very important in the country, especially in the region of Misiones, where the artist is from. In this sense, we can identify in the work the situated gaze in relation to the reuse of waste that large-scale production generates in a specific territory. Likewise, the creation of an original biomaterial from the experimentation with yerba mate and kombucha waste. Next. In this case, I will present a third example of biomaterials development, as it is the proposal of an artist with a different approach within the classification. Her name is Ana Laura Cantera, and she's a specialist in the cultivation of mycelium fungus for the creation of thermal and acoustic insulating panels and design objects in general. I am interested in highlighting a particular work she made in 2021 called Tejidos desde el útero, Weavings from the Womb. The work is a living tissue of temporalities, bodies, and memories, which seeks to rethink the private and the public, the personal and the political, the internal and the external. It proposes to visualize biological processes of women's bodies in order to disarm and unhide the act of being a woman with all that this implies. Next one, please. Go back, please. Yeah, thank you. Cantera explains, I quote, menstrual blood is used as matter and identity, as expelled material. It's the residue, the remainder. It's human non-reproduction. Its use implies perpetuating biological memories, resignifying it and changing its state in order to objectify it. It is to accept its agency and interaction with the environment. It is to reappropriate it. Close quote. The biothreads created by the artist are an interspecies conjunction. They are human fluids in communion with seaweeds. The woven objects are fragile but rigid organs. They are anonymous bodies, and at the same time, they are their part. They are clothes, wombs, they are our endometrial tissues. We are our self-made matter, states the artist. That's the conjunction between the human fluid and the seaweeds, and that make the wool that she used to knit. Yes. Next one, please. Well, I will present the last projects related with this category of randomness in living processes. These two works that you will see deal with chance as the axis of the work. The projects seek to create devices or controlled environments where non-humans are the real protagonists. In this type of poetics, it's possible to identify the artificiality of the natural or the concept of nature itself, even when trying to reflect and create awareness about its care. Biogenerators of microbeasts, Proyecto Microbestiario del Paraná, is a work in stages by artist and biotechnologist Luciana Paoletti. In the city of Rosario, Argentina, where she lives, the Paraná River and its delta are suffering extreme conditions, such as the burning of wetlands and the historical low water level. The project Microbestiario del Paraná, started in 2019, approaches this issue in a scientific, playful, loving way through a succession of stages. Next one, please. In phase 1, the artist interacts with the place, studying its geography and biology, its text, poems, and novels. In that picture, you can see the landscape that it's characteristic of the city of Rosario, and the problem with the fires that are killing everything. They are under control. In phase 2, she takes and analyzes samples in order to capture its microscopic inhabitants. These data allow the beginning of phase 3, in which she generates microbeasts from the in vitro coexistence of species that cannot have physical contact. In this artistic installation, 12 microbeast biogenerators based on experiments by S. Winogradsky facilitate the interaction and development of microorganisms from different areas before and after being subjected to burns, as well as samples of island soil and river bottom currently apparent due to drought. Next. In this other case, the artist Virginia Buitron proposes an interspecies drawing device. After several years of observation and coexistence with the species Hermetia illucens, or known as black soldier fly, she designs an installation habitat shelter based on its life cycle. This species converts organic waste into compost and draws in its prepupal stage. Next one, please. The installation consists of 3 closed and interconnected wooden modules where the flies feed compost bin, draw and pupate, drawing generator plus pupatorium. The different parts of the installation, and reproduce the reproductor of these flies. It's called Hermetiadero. That part. The ink with which they impregnate the agate is compost liquid, that is the liquid that drains from the compost. The active period of the art installation corresponds to the active cycle of the flies between December and March. Then the insects go into diapause. So the installation works where the flies works are active. In the period they are in reproduction or resting or developing itself, the installation can work. Next one, please. Well, I will give you just some ideas or hypotheses or conclusions, if you want to call them, and then we can talk. The impact of human beings on the ecosystem needs to be assessed from a critical perspective that requires an interdisciplinary approach from art, science, and technology studies. The eruptive and creative impulse of bioart projects us towards a particular semiotic regime that is permeable to the human-no-human relationship required by the current geological era known as Anthropocene. The situated bioart that we have recognized as a singular appropriation of the mainstream lab aesthetics of its beginnings actualize a particular sensibility to native knowledge and respect for living processes. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next one, it's just the info for the book, that it's in open access and you can download from the editorial website or in my Instagram profile, and you can also follow the Instagram of the project where we are posting activities and sharing materials that we are thinking of. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Please, anyone in the room and also online, do have a think about questions that you might have. I'm going to definitely take the chair's privilege and ask a couple myself. First of all, that was absolutely fascinating. I couldn't believe the sort of variety of different projects that are working in this kind of space. And obviously, I think your scheme is working so well to begin to sort of classify and categorize those into different ways. It really struck me, I suppose, that the first and the last are in a way, these both in a way sort of a co-storytelling enterprise, you know, between the non-human and human, and insofar as, you know, the things like the moths being provided with a space that they can, you know, live in the absence of that, you know, increasing absence of that, and then those materials being used subsequently to make a, you know, a cape. That was amazing. And then the third one, the kind of randomness in living process that produces these artistic co-productions, I guess. So my first question from that perspective was, I know you've written on this actually, but you know, that does remind me of the avant-garde, you know, the creation of process rather than the focus on the content, the actual process of finding a way to create art and kind of move forward. So do you want to say maybe a bit about how you've situated some of this work in terms of the avant-garde or the neo-avant-garde? That would be
Well, thank you for the question. Yes, well, in this case, I didn't bring 20th century examples of bioart, but particularly in Argentina, we have a really important tradition with artists from the avant-garde who start working with living organisms. For example, the last example of Virginia Buitron, this kind of installation, I don't know if you can show them again. This device, of wooden device, where the flies were living and reproducing and painting or drawing. It has a really, it's connected with another piece of art made by Benedict, who was an artist that works in the 60s, late 60s and 70s. We had in Argentina art history a group called CAIA, Communication, Art and Center of Art and Communication. It was an interdisciplinary group where engineers, sociologues, I don't know, writers, artists work together and think together about these interdisciplinary projects where art and science knowledge combines. And also there was another artist called Victor Grippo who works with potatoes, and he used potatoes to produce energy. And he used an aesthetic typical of the laboratories, because he designed like like wardrobes, like where you put little things, vitrines, classical biology. If you go to a natural science museum, you can find, yes, the cabinets, yes, that kind of aesthetics. And then he puts all the potatoes connected with a very rudimentary cables, and so he measured the electricity they produces, and it was some kind of he was criticizing in that case the advance of the Occidental science ideas with the traditional knowledge that potatoes brought to us, because it was the first, the most important element in Latin America, and also the economy that the potatoes generates allowed us to develop too. So the potato, it was a symbol of a civilization, but it was also it was a source of energy. It could combine with another kinds of materials. And so that was the kind of projects they produced. And so when we studied the relationships between art and science, we are thinking with those first artworks. of course, the avant-garde in Argentina begins after the avant-garde in Europe and United States. Although our artists traveled and studied here, then when they came back to Argentina, they started producing his own version of their own version of the avant-garde. So yes, I think this project has a very a conceptual. Of course, the idea of processes and the idea of concept is more important than the resolution of the art piece or the art project. So yes, I think since conceptual art, everything is conceptual art, no? Combining with living beings in this case, no?
Works so well, yeah, that's particularly in this case. The other question I had was, I guess, to do with the context in which these pieces are then situated and sort of consumed or viewed. Do they tend to stay in the laboratories where they're created, or their sites where they're created? Do they end up in galleries? Because with the second one, the biomaterial development, it struck me that, you know, this is almost possible to produce kind of commercial goods that you could imagine being sold in a design museum. I was just wondering if they actually had that kind of you know, reach or contextual, you know, presence or not.
Yes, I think they have. In particular, the artist who works with yerba mate, she also produced a beverage, and she's on the market. She's a special case because she's a biotechnology too, or a genetic engineering. So it's the less artist of all of them, but she creates this material and she starts creating it, thinking in an artistic way. So their first works were like jewels, and then she started to design accessories like small bags, or I don't know, things that you can put like pins, brooches, and she stopped working for the artwork, no, but it's important what she did, because she used her scientific knowledge and she combined that with the political cause of the production, of the abuse of the production of yerba mate in her place in Misiones, and she found a way to express that problem in a poetic way. Then she realized that she has to live too, and so she started finding another path relating with design, and well, with the use of these nutrients that the yerba mate has to produce an energy beverage that is also natural, or that respect, you know, the process, and it's healthy, and it's a kind of product that we have to think now to produce. In the other ways, the artists that know that experiments a lot with mycelium, with fungus, also they are, it's difficult to establish the limit between art and design in those cases, because they are experiment with that. They don't know what it's going to be, what they are doing. So step by step, once they know how they can produce that biomaterial, well, then they can use it in a poetic way or use it in a practical way. And so, for example, that art project related to women's, it's that textile, those hilos, how do you say that?
Like strings.
Those strings that she created. Well, at first it was like, I don't know, it's not necessary to use menstrual blood to do that. Just with the seaweeds, you can create that. And so, well, once she knew about doing this biomaterial, she could start experiment and generates another kinds of topics and poetics and sense, and create these symbolic pieces, but it's a process. So I think what they had in common, bioartists in general, from the ones that began with this in this lab mainstream aesthetic that I mentioned, is that they are producing knowledge. And so maybe using huge, really well equipped laboratories, or using do-it-yourself recipes from the webs. So that's something that they have in common.
I have more questions, but are there any that the chat? Yeah, is it the sorrow? Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. So, Gianfranco, yeah, I mean, that says thanks for this fascinating presentation. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the debates around bioethics and bioactivism in relation to bioart in Latin America. So bioethics and bioactivism. Yeah, because it struck me that the final one that's obviously talking about the Paraná River with the extreme conditions, that seems like.
Yeah, well, thank you, Gianfranco, for your words. Well, yes, all these projects had a political position, because all of them are talking about global problems, although they start in a situated place and in a situated problem, a local problem, but they are thinking about global issues, because most of them are talking about the relationship between humans and non-humans, the impact of global change, the problems in climate, the climate change, and so I think that's the power of these artistic projects. They use a universal language, that's art, but they are starting in a situated point. Of course, there are another kind of artists that maybe are more political in this, more activism in this category, that I don't use because I don't think it's necessary. But of course, if you talk to the artist themselves, they have strong positions about these topics. But I don't know, I think it's not just being one. It's not a problem that we can divide it as. It's the type of topics they are discussing. They are so global, so that we cannot be from one side or from another. So I don't know if it's an activism position that they have. It's more like a realist. I don't know, they are more conscious about what is happening, and they are proposing not a recipe, but to think, to question, to stop and think in what we can change or better understand about what's happening. Yeah, I think that's what I think about activism and this kind of practices. I know there are more hard pieces of art, or artists that are more public about this, express themselves more public about a topic. For instance, in relation with the massive plantations, in the case of Misiones, for example, or the problem with the minas, the minerals, the exploitation and extraction of the minerals, or the use of, or the abuse in the use of the water. In most I mean, in our region, we have a lot of natural resources that are very valuable. And so we are in a discussion constantly with capitalism and with the way that industry explodes that. But at the same time, we can think about that in from this kind of projects that are not explicitly political in that way, no? But let us think about that too. I think that's what I think about the political dimension of these projects.
Like you say, they're sort of constructing knowledge in a way, and that is, you know, that's political in itself, and perhaps then using that to think, you know, rethink the way that humans engage with non-humans and that we relate to the world, which has its sort of place. And yeah, Gianfranco works on cultures of extractivism in Venezuela, so he's probably looking at that, and also more, like you say, sort of more on the activist end of the spectrum as well, where there's specific problems that need to be addressed in local contexts, and, you know, the interface between legal processes and art and technology and science as well. So yeah, great. Oh, great. And we've got a couple of hands raised. Yeah, should we take one in the room? Okay. Yeah, the question was about the sort of presence of possibly ancestral forms of knowledge or indigenous kind of artists or anything like that in the project or in what's going on in Argentina.
Yes, well, I'm not working with explicit community people from the, but what I mean with using traditional knowledge or combining with more modern ways of producing knowledge with autochthonous production of knowledge. It's that what the artists are doing, although they are not from a community, it's like restaurating ways of live with these non-human species that are not mainstream. In some cases, I mean, they have to respect nature, and that's the most important knowledge that we have been left behind in modern science. So when, I don't know, Karina Salinas designed that device where she lived together with these basket bags, she starts knowing with that insect, she lives with them during years, and she started learning from what they are. She started looking for the information of the people who lived before her, because those species were typical when she was young, and now they are not living there anymore. So she starts recovering all that information for eldest people, from people who lives in different areas of the city, or in places where they still have that kind of bags, and that's not scientific knowledge necessarily. Although she can help scientists to understand better this kind of life processes, because she's in contact with biologists in the local university, but they are not interested in studying that, and so she's producing her own knowledge about these convivencia, I don't know, this co-living and recovering, that's what I mean, no? Recovering a lot of experience of the relationships between this kind of species and humans that doesn't exist anymore, and they are not so old. In other cases, yes, we can, like for example, when I just told you about Grippo and that project with the potato. Well, he also brought back that knowledge about potatoes that we are not used to think about, and that's the kind of hybrid or interchange of perspectives that these projects actualize. I don't know if I respond to you, but of course, I can find people from the communities, from the traditional communities that are working with this, but I don't know if it's necessary to be a person of a community, a specific community, to do this kind of artworks or projects or interest, or have interest in this kind of interchange.
Should we go to Florian or yeah, let's go to Florian and then we'll go back into the room.
My turn. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but it was a fascinating talk. I guess my question sort of slightly bounces off Emily's initial two questions, in as much as I wanted to invite you to think or reflect a bit more on the processes of both of co-creation and spectatorship in these works of arts. And I was really struck by the temporalities that they construct and the speeds in, I guess, because on some level, some of these don't really have a form that is stable in time. Although then when you show us a photograph, you do give us a form which is fixed. And I was just wondering whether you could say a bit more about how you know, when there are processes of slow co-creation that are perhaps particularly relevant, and also whether there is a sense that perhaps our interaction with these works as audiences, as spectators, needs to be slow, because they change in ways on scales that are not familiar to us.
Totally, I totally agree. And I think that that's one of the most important things about these art projects that make us think about the relationship between human and non-humans, are that we have to learn about these other kinds of temporalities. If they work with animals, or if they work with plants, or if they work with fungus, they have to respect their own time, and we have to learn from that process. And so we are like changing our place. Now, that's why we think about this kind of projects dialogue very well with the Anthropocene time that we are living. There's an artist, a Spanish artist called Paula Bruna, and she proposed to think from the Plantoceno, no, not from the Anthropoceno, which is like we continue to put ourselves in the middle and try to think from the other side, trying to think like a plant, which is impossible, but we are trying to do that, and in a respectful way, learning about them, and that's a lot, I think, no? Yes, I think the coexistence of different temporalities, that's one of the most interesting points in these collaborations. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the most challenging things to representation in the Anthropocene, you know, we talk about sometimes the novelistic form and whether that has a privileged sort of ability to experiment with time, but actually here we sort of see it play out in a certain kind of real time, which is also really exciting and different. So yeah.
Yes, and although trying to enter in communication, that gesture that the group Electrobiota try to do, to listen what is happening in the resource fair, what can we do to perceive that sounds without being invasive, in a respectful way, just to take into account that underneath us there's life, that it's fluid, that is that we have to respect, that we have a lot, sure we have a lot to learn from that processes too, and that we are connected with that, although we can see them or we can listen to them. I think that project, it's really interesting in different ways, because they combine that the object of being entering communication with the resource fair, but also that there is a world that is not present for us, but coexist with us, and that we depend and when we affect, and that helps to think Anthropocene theories and questions our presence in here. So yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's just saying thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we maybe let's have one more quick question. But yeah. I was just going to repeat that for the online, but yeah, a question about the irony of kind of using living creations and living beings whilst also sort of seeking to critique that, you know, utility, use or exploitation of them, and the sort of degree to which there's a tension there, or, you know, and the use of trees, bugs, and do you have to sort of be mindful of the degree of consciousness, and that's what I'm sort of interpreting. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, of course, it's one of the obligated questions. That tension exists, of course. It's difficult to cohabit with a non-human without being together. So it's how we will know about them if we don't share something. I think this project has a strong conscience about not being violent, being sensible, being respectful, and they are trying to have the less impact as possible in the non-human's life. But to know each other, they have to design some kinds of experiments to create this, to learn about them. Of course, there are some bioethics codes that they have to take into account, and that's something that we have learned from the first experience of bioartists, because when they worked in labs, they have to use the same biosecurity standards that scientists used. But in these cases, they are I mean, science it's more violent, and it's allowed to do what happens in labs, in biotechnology labs. It's allowed, and this is, in terms of bioethics, this is allowed too. And in terms of politics or tensions, well, if we are too radical, we can't have plants, we can't have domestic animals, we can't use clothes, we can't live in cities, and we can't paint because the oil is extracted from, it's an industrial process, and lots of materials that we use with a specific purpose, they have a waste, or they are not compostable, or so we are in a dilemma here. We are trying to lead with this problem. We are more consciousness. I think these artists help us to be more consciousness about and to start changing some things. But we were discussing in Barcelona with people that is thinking to this kind of problems and projects, and that if these projects have to give us answers or give us I don't know, a way of living, our way, something to do, and in terms of this different temporality, we arrived to the conclusion that we have to do nothing. We have to wait, to stop, to learn, to try to don't make more damage, and maybe that's the best we can do, not do nothing, because we are doing so much and we are destroying as far as we are trying to do something. So maybe we just have to stop, learn from the non-human processes, and maybe in a few, I don't know when, we can find some answers. But yes, there's that tension always. But I think in these artistic projects that are very sensible about these problems, I think that it's necessary to let them create and co-create.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. And also, I guess it's funny how we sort of project as humans. I was thinking about the moths. It's obviously nice for them because they have this habitat that they wouldn't otherwise have. And then perhaps we feel sorry for the microbiotic species that are in the test tube, but really that, you know, maybe they're perfectly happy in the test tube. So we don't know. I guess it's fascinating. Like you say, these things do need to exist for us to sort of be able to appreciate that the possibility of a sort of dialogue or a co-species storytelling or whatever we want to kind of call it. It's exciting ultimately, and as long as we're sensitive, we can keep moving knowledge forward in this area, as well as thinking about the sort of wider issues associated with the Anthropocene and capitalism, and yeah, all the intersections that we've been talking about today. But yeah, that was really exciting. Thank you. I think yeah, that brings us to the end of the time. So it remains just to say thank you again to Lucía for a really, really fascinating talk. And thank you to everyone who joined us in the room and online as well. It's been amazing. So thank you. Do stay for a glass of wine, please. There is red or white or soft drinks or crisps if you don't have to rush off.